Ladies and gentlemen, my loving friend Joe is here.
Scotch Irish.
Yeah, he's, what are you?
Scotch Irish.
Which explains the t-shirt. What we have here now is just an open forum. Todd has agreed to sit in on this segment only as an observer. And,
I'm a gypsy, by the way.
And a gypsy. Joe, take it away.
Irish.
Irish gypsy. It's the same thing, really.
What do you think about the history of the Irish American? No, I'm just kidding. Irish don't get any publicity, any good. What do they get?
Well, actually, there's been a lot of
They like to drink and fight.
yeah, a lot of anti-Black Lives Matter type stuff on the internet lately, claiming that the Irish were treated worse than the Africans in terms of the slave market and economic oppression and such. And you know, I wasn't around back then. I believe it's probably true. Irish are stupider and more drunk all the time.
Right. Don't you think everybody gets their turn in the barrel, though? I mean, historically,
if you had red hair back in certain Roman decades, it was assumed that you were a slave because the Thracians all were redheads, and the Thracians were all slaves. Economically, over history, the lowest socioeconomic group has been the slaves of society. The problem with the United States, which happened concurrently with Brazil, who doesn't have the same big problem we have, is that the English said slavery is not okay. You cannot enslave humans. So the English decided, well, they're not human. They're livestock. They're animals. And the whole racist
idea
got planted in the American culture, and it's pernicious and it's horrible, and it's the biggest single factor that can basically destroy life as we know it, and it's been that case since I was a little kid. I mean, racism was alive and well when I was a kid, and I feel weird talking about racism with a black guy because it's just not really safe to do most of the time.
Well, you know, I think it's a lot of it has to do with the miseducation and the ignorance of I will speak on behalf of my community. We really are trained to have certain ignorant concepts about race relation. What do you think the difference between racism and tribalism is? Is there really a difference between the respectable culturistic value of tribalism, where you have these tribes, whether it's in Northern Ireland or back in the day in Africa, or even right now in Southern America, South America, tribalism opposed to the racist kind of Tutsis against the Nutsis or whatever? What's the difference?
Xenophobia is a survival mechanism, and if you walk over the hill while I'm out hunting for berries and you're hunting for berries, I don't know if you're safe or not because you're different.
Right.
So if you're wearing the wrong color beads or whatever, we could have a problem, and it hasn't changed much.
Right.
You know, so
it's kind of the same, I think.
Well, racism is based on usually in this country the color of your skin, whereas tribalism is more based on what Joe's talking about, your culture, your location.
Geographic, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but when you take a certain tribe of people that you're not supposed to be able to enslave because they're human, then you have to dehumanize them and claim they're not human. Which starts as insanity.
Right.
In the culture.
Agree.
Whereas in Brazil, they have the same market suppliers of slaves, the Arabs, back at the same time.
Right.
And Brazilians don't care. There's no more Indians in Brazil except in the jungle because they all intermarried.
Right.
When I was a Mormon missionary in Brazil, I talked to blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, and we were supposed to interview them to make sure they didn't have African descent, because then we couldn't tell them about the church. We'd tell them Jesus loves you and leave. And a lot of times, oh yeah, this is my great-grandmother. You know, she was from Africa. You talk about the history of Brazil. Oh, Brazil's so wonderful. People come from everywhere. There's Italians, Portuguese, and Indians. What kind of Indians are in your family? The ones with the big flat nose, or the ones with the long hair that live in the jungle?
Right.
And oh, my grandmother came from Africa. Here's a picture. Oh, well, Jesus loves you. We got to go. I mean, that was what we had to do back in the early 70s.
Do you believe that racism will ever get to a point, or race relations, I won't call it racism, do you believe that race relations in America will ever get better, or will it change for us? Will it go, or has it changed? I mean, you're older than me. Has it? What's the
definitely
difference
different than it
between
was.
now and in the '50s or when you grew up? Basically, between the races and shit.
Well, from where I sit, in the 50s and 60s, if a white person stepped up, for a black person, then a large portion of the white community would label you as an N lover,
Right.
and you were a pariah.
Excommunicated.
Yeah,
basically.
well, socially for a while,
Right.
until and it wasn't a safe thing to do. And the same type of economic snubbing and sanctions. And of course, where I grew up was very redneck. It wasn't. There weren't a lot of liberals or big city types around.
Todd, you grew up in
Mix
Princeton,
up.
right?
I grew up in. I'm a big city type. But there's a.
Wait a minute. What's the difference between where you grew up and where he grew up? Because you're both white. So
I'm a gypsy.
no, but where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Anaheim and Orange County, and
See, you grew up in
Central Illinois.
right.
And,
It's rural versus urban. It's
rural, and then it went urban, but it was a university town, and there were the the blue collar people working at the big craft plant, and Champaign, Illinois. If you die fearing God and painfully employed, you will not go to heaven. You'll go to Champaign, Illinois. There was that, but the liberal university atmosphere, it was either the farms, the little farm towns with the circle in the middle, and or Champaign-Urbana, which is intellectual oasis in the middle of all the cornfields.
So what do you think keeps the bullshit going? I mean, without blaming, what besides the history of it, now that we know, and there's a lot of people on this planet who know the information that you just exposed in regards to racism, what keeps it going? Just the anxiety
I
and the
just
violence
saw
and all that?
I just saw a story this morning about this. These cops went to somebody's house and they got the wrong guy. And it was some black kid. He was like 15 or something, 13. And they wouldn't listen to him. He was trying to tell him he wasn't the guy. And he had ID, and they didn't want to see it. And they ended up tasing him. And he wasn't arguing. It's all on video. So if there is a happy solution, hopefully it's maybe all the videos being everywhere, waking everybody up to the reality. And I love cops and I defend cops, but I understand about 50% of cops are horrible, sociopathic, evil, cruel, malicious people with they're as bad as Charles Manson. I mean
There's
that's
a
about
lot of
50-50.
instant justice that goes on.
Well, they're sociopaths. They have no capacity for empathy. That's statistically a fact. That's
Right.
not an opinion.
Right.
But there's
Scary.
also, they have a culture of that, especially so one cop shoots a guy, an unarmed good dude with his hands up, and this has happened over and over again. And what do the other cops immediately do? They lie for that guy.
Yeah.
They say, yeah, he was coming at us, and he was, even though they know there's videotape of it.
And they have it all on video.
Yeah,
but it's
and they'll
gonna-
still,
I
their
want to
knee-jerk
say
reaction is to lie.
the one thing I don't like about it is they make it race, and I have seen black cops just as fucking
Sure,
ignorant as any other white angry cop. I've seen it, especially in LA, because they're trying to mix
Okay,
up.
well, it's not race within the police. Because
No, that's what I mean.
They're,
It's not
they're
race
all,
with-
they're all police.
they're all going to
Their
back each
color
other
is
up.
blue.
Absolutely.
And
Right, that's a
but
good
that's
point.
against the black people. But then see, they kill white people too.
That's what I'm going
Unarmed
to
white
say.
people.
But was it, and that brings up the other big pet peeve with me anyway, and that's the right to bear arms, the Second Amendment, whatever you want to call it. I think it was Chris Rock, I might have my black celebrities confused, but said the reason we have guns in the ghetto is to protect ourselves and police.
Right.
And that's a very true thing. Now, if you've ever lived, I've lived in Brazil and I've lived in Mexico where people aren't allowed to have personal firearms. The police there make our police all look like Mother Teresa saints.
Yeah.
It's so horrible. And
That's true.
there's one or two European countries maybe where they don't have guns and the cops are nice, but that's the exception that proves the rule.
Right.
All these other countries where people don't have guns and only the police have guns,
It's
the police
bad.
are so abusive and so horrible.
Mexico's a great
In
example,
Mexico, right next door, what goes on there, and the fact that the third worldization of the United States with all the immigration. There's all these immigrants coming here whose conception of police is they're just the worst gang out there and they're legal. So you can't absolutely trust police. You've got the cultural push against police, or not just, I'm glad you're there to protect me from thieves. It's people, all these immigrants come from a culture where you cannot trust police. They're the worst people around.
Well,
And so the societal attitude permeates the large cities with all the immigrant populations that police are the
never
worst
thought of
gang
that.
ever. It's a fact. I mean,
Well, the
it's-
New York cops, for example, were the Italians got here before the Irish, and they were organized crime, and the Irish, to defend themselves, all became police, which was another organized crime organization,
Exactly,
which
yeah.
continues to this day. L.A. is one of the worst.
He's Irish.
Oh, I didn't know you were
Irish and
Irish.
Gypsy.
Why do you look
Irish
better
and
as an
Gypsy.
Irishman than me? You're a darky one, right?
Yeah,
There's
but
dark-
I'm at least
Aren't
like,
you the black Irish?
Yeah, no, I got part gypsy too.
Oh, you
Yeah.
keep saying that. Okay.
Everybody hates gypsies. Even black people hate
Even
gypsies.
black people hate gypsies. There's nothing worse than a black person but a gypsy. Listen, that's all the time we have now. These gentlemen will come back. I really want to I want to say this. I want to close with this since this is my show. Growing up, I went to school with a lot of white people, more than I probably was supposed to. And can I just say, thank God that there are people from all races who actually aren't full of shit. Because without a sensible cluster of certain individuals from places outside of my culture, without those white people, it would be a lot worse. Because you got to think about like Marlon Brando and Paul Newman. They marched with King. They weren't outsiders saying, "Ooh, I hope the blacks don't get us." No. And like he was saying, if you were friends with a black person, you were called an in-lover, but that's still but it still happened. There were still white people helping with this indigenous group of crazy people eat chicken. No, I'm just kidding.
Bernie
Okay.
Sanders also.
Right. Right. Anyway, that's all the time we have for now. JP will edit this and we'll get it up as soon as possible. Thank you.